Hello. Thanks very much. Great to be here this morning. So I am going to start out talking about some history of Silicon Valley, um, what I think makes it special and what I think makes it struggle, and then talk a little bit about my experience moving to Oslo and here so far. So I actually started in the year 2000. I actually was interviewing right around the time that the dot-com bubble peaked, and I started a few months later after it started going down. I was lucky enough to keep my job and learn a lot along the way. I worked at some big companies. I worked at some smaller companies and some true startups. And in 2018, my family and I decided to move to Oslo, and I started working at Vipps. It's interesting to note that on this map, it's actually to scale. So you see the Oslo region in the top corner, and you see Silicon Valley going from San Francisco down to San Jose, and it's a little more than that. So kind of just to get a sense for how big of a geographic area it is as well. And you know what? I think I'm just going to do this talk from Oslo. So 1 second.
Hi. Okay, here we are. So why is tech in the SF Bay Area anyways? I'm going to start the story 70 years ago, around 1951, when the Santa Clara Valley, which is now Silicon Valley, was known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. The population was less than 1 million. It was mostly a fruit producer and orchards. And this was in the post-World War II economy where the US had a strong middle class and a strong social safety net. At that time, New York City was actually the hub of innovation, with a lot of innovation stemming from like the last waves of the Industrial Revolution. There was steel, railroads, banking, telephone, and telecom, and it was all in New York, and that's where all the stuff was happening. At that same year, Stanford created Stanford Research Park, which is basically unutilized land owned by the university. And they wanted to allow it to be leased out cheaply to attract scientific talent to the area so that they could build up some companies there. Back in New York City, William Shockley invented the transistor while working at Bell Labs, which is a very consequential invention. Wanting to capitalize on the potential of that invention, he left to form Shockley Semiconductor, which he formed in Mountain View, California, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. And he did that to be close to his mom. So that's one of the reasons it's there. Because of who he was able to attract talented engineers and scientists from around the country and to form his company. In 1956, he was actually awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for the invention of the transistor. The photo on the right there is showing him and his team at Shockley Semiconductor celebrating that news. And while he was a brilliant scientist, he was a pretty rough personality and an autocratic leader. And this led to 8 of his best employees, many of whom are in that picture, leaving to form Fairchild Semiconductor. And it's hard to overstate how impactful Fairchild Semiconductor has been on the tech industry and really on everything. Many of their inventions affect all of our lives today. They invented the microchip, for one. They were also the first company to take venture capital money, or VC money. And they were also the first company with a flat structure. They were also the first company to use silicon in transistors at a time when germanium was the most common material, and that is why it is called Silicon Valley. 2 of the founders, Gordon Moore and Robert Noyce, went on to form Intel in 1968. Another founder, Eugene Kleiner, went on to form the VC firm Kleiner Perkins, which has funded tons of companies. To name a few: Amazon, Electronic Arts, Square, Google, Netscape, Sun, Twitter, the list goes on. And there were actually a few VC firms that formed from Fairchild Semiconductor. But what made it great for them at the time? One is density of engineers, partly in thanks to William Shockley recruiting those people out there, and Stanford recruiting people out for the Stanford Research Lab. Another one is just good infrastructure, both physical and social infrastructure. They were the first to take VC money. That's a huge advantage. And they had low costs. That's obviously changed in the Bay Area since then. And maybe most importantly, they had the ability and willingness to take risks. So they were so influential after many cycles of investment over and over again. By 2014, of the 130 plus public Bay Area tech companies, 70% can be traced back to Fairchild Semiconductor, which is really just a kind of a mind-blowing statistic, and that's how influential they were. You can even see Apple is the first company on that list. Steve Jobs actually sought out a relationship and a friendship with Robert Noyce, and they had like a friendship and a sort of mentor-mentee relationship, which kind of ties the original getting started of Silicon Valley almost to today. So what makes Silicon Valley special today? I really think, so everyone is going for it in a big way. There's this feeling that anything is possible and that it actually can happen, and you believe it can happen because you see it happening all around you. You know someone that started a company and it's been successful or been part of a big, huge IPO or just done great things, and there's such a long history of success in the region that it just feels, everything feels possible. There's also this risk-taking culture, which there's like, they'll take risks on ideas and they'll take risks on people. So there's this idea that if you just get a bunch of smart people in the room and if they want to build something, they'll just figure it out. And that's really cool because that gives a lot of people a lot of opportunities they wouldn't have in a more traditional environment. And it probably makes a lot of things that we have today, that's possible because of that perspective. An interesting example of just why that makes a difference, when Facebook was getting started, maybe this is well known already, but they were in, Mark Zuckerberg was at Harvard trying to raise money for Facebook, and the East Coast VCs, which were much more risk averse and trying to manage risk, wouldn't give him any money. He went out west, he got funding, people were willing to take the risk, and we all know how that turned out. It helps also that there's no stigma to failure. Failure is really a necessary step on the way to success. It's not fun to fail, granted, but you can do it and just move on. That failure doesn't have to live with you as you keep going, so you just keep on moving. And really, it helps that there's a lot of VC money, and and that helps the cycle of investment continue. And that just creates a culture of getting things done. So you can just take risks, make things happen. If it fails, you move on, you take other risks, and we get great things from it. It is really a special place. So I have to just say that. I really enjoyed it. But what makes it struggle? Because it does struggle as well. So it's extremely expensive to live and start a business. I think maybe that's well known by now as well. But it's worth noting that it's expensive on both sides. Like, it's not just expensive to live there. If you want to start a company there, you need a lot of venture capital. And it's these amounts that sound like a huge amount, but it doesn't keep you going for that long because you have to pay your engineers a ton of money, and they won't even have like a typical middle-class life from that huge salary. Like the houses in this picture, that's only for rich people. That's not for your typical Silicon Valley engineer. There's older infrastructure in the Bay Area that's extremely frustrating. It's not being updated. And honestly, it just feels like it's falling apart around you. Older engineers are leaving. A lot of times that coincides with having a family, where it just feels like things get crazy and you don't want to deal with it anymore. VCs know that's happening. There is a lot of VC money, so it helps keep it going, but that's still happening and they're aware of it. And a really interesting thing is the old infrastructure is really a business opportunity as well. So to give some examples, these are startups. I think everyone's familiar with Uber, maybe Lyft as well. These are startups that are fixing broken infrastructure. So One Medical and Forward are a very small piece of trying to fix something about the US healthcare system, which is very strange, very odd system. The last one is a funny one. Just like so many things aren't updated, a lot of these very expensive apartments in San Francisco are old and they're not updated. And a lot of them don't even have a laundry in the building. So you find yourself rushing home one day to get your laundry, go to the laundromat, put a bunch of coins in the machine, try to get some work done while you're there. Or you use a service like Rinse, which picks up your laundry and then drops it off a day or two later. And it feels kind of absurd just describing it. But the real point here is that there are thousands of engineers working on what is essentially fixing broken infrastructure. And would that energy and effort not be put to better use creating something new? And I have to comment as well that I don't need any of these things in Oslo. I use so many startups in services from startups in San Francisco that were kind of trying to patch the broken pieces, and I don't need any of them anymore. And it's awesome. So here's a quote from a VC saying essentially the same thing. But I also have to comment that I don't think this means Silicon Valley is going anywhere. In the same way that New York City was a hub of innovation 70 years ago, it's still a great city. It's an awesome city, and there's innovative things happening there. And I think Silicon Valley will remain as well. I think it will continue, and people will still do innovative things, and there will still be cool companies. But I also think that both of those places have kind of progressed enough to this point where there's such competition for resources and there's such a high cost of living, and especially with the Bay Area that really does not keep up like the physical infrastructure either, it just gets too frustrating, and you feel like you're not free to just dream and think about what you're working on and what you want to build in the future. So you can actually be more free other places, at least in my experience. So a lot of people have asked me, where will the next Silicon Valley be? And I answer, I have no idea. But if history is an indicator, I think innovative things will happen where people are educated, not struggling with daily life and infrastructure, and are generally doing okay. And they're free to dream and think about the future and just focus on their work. In his last interview, Robert Noyce was asked what he would do if he were emperor of the United States. He said that he would, among other things, make sure that we are preparing the next generation to flourish in a high-tech age. And that means education for the lowest and the poorest, as well as at the graduate school level. And I know a place that is doing exactly that. So let's talk about Oslo. One of the things we noticed, and we kept noticing again and again after we moved here, is that things work and they're modern. And these things, like maybe they don't look like the most exciting things that you see, like the post office and maybe bank ID or whatever else, I don't know. But I actually think they are pretty exciting because they work and they're also all connected with each other. Like a lot of these things I can just log in with bank ID and it just has my information already because everything's connected. And I think like this sort of connectedness, this high level of trust in Norwegian society, and I think maybe the connectedness is a result of that. And the fact that these products are for everybody, right? Like these products are not just for rich people. These are great things that everyone can use. That really creates a lot of possibility. We have like this great foundation to build on here. And I just think it's really exciting. So people have asked me, okay, how can the post office be exciting? Let's have a look. So we'll do some comparisons about daily life. So when I get something here in Norway, I get it in Digipost. It's like a PDF that comes to my phone or the app on my phone or a website. If it's sensitive information, I can still get it thanks to Bank ID. Bank ID is another thing, by the way, that does not exist in the US, nothing like it exists. It's just very convenient, right? I can also see an augmented reality picture of the things that are being delivered to me, and that's just cool. In the US, the best thing I could find was this service that will send you a grainy black and white image of the outside of your mail. So this is the mail that will be there in your actual mailbox when you get home. And maybe that's useful. Comparing public transportation it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. There's really not a comparison. Public transportation in the Bay Area, and actually even driving in the Bay Area, all the infrastructure around transportation is very frustrating. Buses are often late or just don't show up. They're not very nice to be on most of the time. And even during rush hour, like it can be hard to get an Uber because they're stuck in traffic as well. So you say, oh, the bus isn't coming. Okay, maybe I'll call an Uber. And then the Uber will cancel on you because he's just stuck in traffic and he's never going to get there. And then you say, okay, forget it. I'll just walk home, whatever. Here, Ruter buses are clean, comfortable. They come every few minutes during rush hour. I don't even check when it's coming. I just go to the bus stop and one shows up. And they even have like USB ports in the seats by every seat in case you need to charge your phone. It's kind of amazing. Ruter is like the limousine of public buses. Another A more recent one, thanks to the pandemic, is the vaccine card. In Norway, you just log into Helse Norge with your bank ID. All your information is there. You show your card, it has a QR code, you scan it, you're ready to go. In the US, you get a piece of paper that doesn't even fit into a normal-sized wallet. So we live in a place with great universities and lots of smart people, very functional infrastructure, both physical, technical, and social. There's a high level of trust and cooperation in society, and investment activity is growing. So really, we just need to build stuff. And we are building stuff. A lot of times when people will talk to me and say like, oh, you know, there's so many cool companies in Silicon Valley, which of course there are, because there's a lot of people and companies, but there's a lot of cool companies here too. We really have a good start, and we're on our way. And I think it's worth recognizing that we are making a lot of cool stuff already. And investment activity is growing quite a bit. It's really interesting to see that since 2018, when I moved here, it's very much going in the right direction. An investment in a company is great in many ways. Like, you're not just putting your money into something, hoping that you'll get something back. You're creating a new company, you're giving people jobs. Those people create something that is valuable for parts of society, or maybe many parts of society. If they're successful, you get your payout, they get a payoff, they become investors, they invest in companies, and that cycle just continues. So you really are creating value in many ways. So what's my takeaway from all this? One, I would just say invest. There is a lot of money in Norway. We can put more of it into new companies. Build stuff. We're already building stuff. Let's keep going. We have a lot of great, talented people here. It's worth saying that working here when I'm at work, I feel like I'm at work in Silicon Valley. I'm working with smart engineers, designers, product people, sales people, business people, everybody. It's really good. It feels the same when I'm at work. I'd say go big, think big and internationally. Norway already feels like living in the future, so we might as well keep building the future and take it to the rest of the world. And part of that future is the green shift. There's going to be a ton of energy and investment put into green technologies. And I think Norway is well situated to be a part of that. If we could solve climate change along the way, that'd be great. So please do that. But really, okay, so we started our story talking about 70 years ago, talking about Silicon Valley and how it was a fruit producer. And it wasn't Silicon Valley, it was the Santa Clara Valley, the Valley of Heart's Delight. And it was by no means the obvious place to be the epicenter of tech. But it had the ingredients to be a great place, and here we are talking about it 70 years later. Norway also has those ingredients. So for me, the more interesting question is, what will people be saying about us in 70 years? Thanks.